Ready to explore the latest trends in real estate? What are innovators in building planning for the future? The Ralph Bivins Project digs deep into the minds of key players in the industry and discussions with today's thought leaders. I'm Ralph Bivins. As a journalist who's covered the real estate and development industry for decades, I invite you to join me as we probe for new ideas and projects that will be making headlines soon. We love to ask hard questions to interesting people. When you've done over 100,000 interviews, you seem to get enlightening answers. Don't forget to download and review this podcast on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your audio inspiration. You can also watch and subscribe on YouTube or visit realtynewsreport.com. It's Ralph Bivins at the Ralph Bivins Project. Be sure to check us out on realtynewsreport.com for daily updates on news about real estate, development, economy, things like that. And we're really lucky today to John Brady, President and CEO of Uptown Houston Association. And he's been there a while. And the Uptown Houston, of course, is, I guess they used to call it, one time they called it Edge City for a while. And about 6 miles from downtown. And I think something like that west of downtown near the Galleria, and it's pretty good. And there's a lot of uses here. There's just everything. Mixed use project. It's a project. It's a place. It's a place. It's with something like the Galleria is the first cornerstone. So, and John is he's getting ready to retire for 37 years of hard labor here, and he's worked hard and accomplishment list. We're not going to get it. We're not going to be able to cover it all. We'd have to stay here all day. But John, thanks for taking time to talk with us.
My pleasure.
I was just thinking about back to the beginning, and I guess it's Gerald Hines came out with the mid '60s. Liz starting to talk about late '60s. Opened the Galleria when Westheimer didn't have anything like that. He took huge risk, but came out with what some consider a masterpiece, kind of a forerunner of really great master plan or mixed use development and well planned. What if, I was just wondering, you thought about this, I'm sure, but if that hadn't been kind of the cornerstone or the launch pad for Uptown, would things would have been different, hadn't they?
It's interesting. There were developments along Post Oak Boulevard, or Post Oak Road, as it was known at the time. Late 50s had followed residential development, sort of Houston and other Sun City, sort of typical suburban development. And so I really think that if it hadn't been for the Galleria thing was just a total quantum leap in terms of the amount of development, but the pieces were there. There were retail centers up and down Post Oak Boulevard, small, single story. But what you really caught was that phenomenal period in Houston where this city grew in terms that I think very few cities in the world had ever experienced. What happened in the 70s and 80s, Ralph, it's hard to imagine that the West Loop wasn't really fully constructed until after 1969.
Yeah. Been there forever.
We all think that it was like that forever, and it just hasn't. But I think Mr. Hines sort of ratcheted up what the vision, what others thought could happen. Mr. Hines produced a book about much of his development activities. And in his book, he talks about the Galleria, the office buildings, the hotels. And he says that he was hopeful of what that project would be, and it has been wildly successful. But what he was really amazed about was what happened around the Galleria, the whole Uptown area, the development. You think about the amount of office buildings that were built in the very late 70s and the very early 80s. Williams Tower was completed by 1983. The Galleria was open 69, 70. A decade where over 10 million square feet of office space was developed. And we thought that, well, that sounded about right. To come find out, it was an unprecedented amount of growth. I remember visiting with, I think we all remember Howard Horn, who was responsible for leasing so many of the office buildings during that time frame. And in 1983, sitting in a small meeting with him, he said, we're in for a very difficult 18 to 24 months. Well, in downtown, 20 years later, Cowpines was developed. And so Houston has had this incredible roller coaster of cyclical development, and certainly Uptown benefited from that. What I think evolved and what we've actually made a contribution towards is, if you'll think about this, Giorgio Borlenghi came in up on the north end, north of San Felipe, and built Four Oaks Place. Hines and others built Post Oak Central, sort of halfway between San Felipe and Westheimer and Post Oak Boulevard. The Galleria at Westheimer and Post Oak Boulevard, and then near south of there was the Lakes on Post Oak, another kind of nodal development. Yeah. In the beginning, these were just individual projects. And what we have done over the years is taking these individual projects that were unrelated and really connected them together, and sort of the overall area now is identifiable. It's, you know, what Post Oak Boulevard does to connect the area together, et cetera. I think that we achieved something significant by making all of those individual pieces kind of come together to form a single business community. And then you begin to look at the land use you mentioned, office, enormous amount of retail, hotels. But, you know, in the 1990s with Giorgio's development, the early 80s, 90s, it really continued to grow and provided maybe the real growth spurt was in residential development.
That's still Uptown Houston, tremendous amount of residential growth, and we're still, it's like, talk about every use, residential's been huge, and it's still happening. It's still growing. We're getting more and more people living in this area. And so now we got, yeah, but you're right. Giorgio Borlenghi did the four-leaf, came in four-leaf condominium towers there on San Felipe, and it was kind of it took a while. It took a while because they were for sale, and the economy was in the there was the oil crash and all that. So, but he rented them. He rented a lot of them for a while, and now it's one of many popular residential projects in this area. So what? And one thing I did want to ask you about, we mentioned some of these office towers that were built in the 80s, 70s, a number of years ago, a number of decades ago. But this concept, and there are people looking at it, people talking about it, about converting these office buildings into residential. Tell me about that and how that's working in Uptown.
Well, I think that the idea of converting office buildings into residential is an idea that many people say that would be a quick fix. The reality is there are big challenges to doing that. The floor plates for an office building are much more significant than they would be for a residential building. And so you end up getting units perhaps that have very little out exterior glass, things like that. But I think it's something that is going to be a bigger and bigger part of the future. It's real hard to understand where we are in office buildings. I think the pandemic was a total change. Subsequently to the pandemic, the idea of working from home, hybrid work times, it is really making the real estate industry pause and take a look at, what's our future. I know that there are discussions, without naming any individual projects, of reducing the amount of office space. And if that means, in some instances, it may be more economic to actually take the building down rather than trying to actually do conversion. Now, when you get a major building, that might be a bit overstated, but a lot of the inventory probably, particularly some of the smaller office buildings, that use probably redevelop, do residential, do some mixture of office, residential, and retail, is something I think is pretty actively being discussed. But I've actually heard rumors of significant office buildings being taken down to reduce.
That states easier to just take it down, start it. Well, we know, that, I guess 55 San Felipe is in Uptown. If not, it's real close to the border. But and of course, Barry Sternlicht's organization has said that they're looking at it for residential conversion, which the guy's smart. He didn't make many mistakes, and so it could work. I don't know.
Yeah, I just think the whole future of office buildings is something that the whole world is thinking about now. But the unique thing I think about this area is that the residential location is perhaps the most sensitive of any of the location decisions in real estate. You're more worried about who your neighbor is. You're more concerned about crime, traffic, schools, and things like that. It's interesting that Uptown is historically in a great position, that it can be a location of choice for residential development, and I think that really is what led the kind of evolution that we've seen with it really since the 1990s, using this area as a location of choice for residential development. It's also interesting that my development industry tells me that you can pay more for property to be used as residential than you can pay for an office building.
No kidding.
I don't know. So all of a sudden, sites are have bidders for both office and residential's been winning in that discussion in the near term, and I think it will for foreseeable future.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good things about the Uptown because some of the neighborhoods around it,
Exactly.
Tanglewood on one side and Afton Oaks, and not that far from.
And Houston is becoming more and more urban in its whole center city area. And as you look from Uptown and as you look east and through the Memorial Park area, downtown, et cetera. And we not only have worried about improving Post Oak Boulevard, but we're now thinking that in terms of residential development, having an active urban lifestyle is highly desirable. And so we are spending a lot of effort improving our access to Memorial Park and building some additional green spaces even within the Uptown area.
That's a great idea. I know the Uptown Park has been Uptown's been good. Memorial Park's been fantastic, and what you've done there is in the past couple of years has been a game changer, I guess.
And we were just fortunate enough to receive an $18.5 million grant from through TxDOT using federal transportation funds to build a pedestrian bicycle path from Post Oak Boulevard into Memorial Park in the Arboretum. And part of that's constructing a new bridge crossing Buffalo Bayou that will be a suspension bridge, and will make it much safer and much more convenient for runners, walkers, and cyclists to actually live in the Uptown area and get easy access into Memorial Park.
That would be great. Great. Someday, I haven't walked across the Earth Bridge over Memorial Drive yet, but I've been underneath it. But that's a good, creative idea. Very creative.
It's really. I encourage you to. There's some great parking opportunities there on the south side, and just to get out and walk and go up over. It's you and I have been in Houston for long enough that that's a unique experience to go over Memorial, tie the two sides of the park together. Long term, I think it's going to be just a game changer for Memorial Park and for the overall Houston community as they use the park itself.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear about the bridge and the bicycle pedestrian bridge. That's going to be a great thing. I hope, I'm sure you'll find somebody to really do a statement type bridge with, some great architecture that's going to.
It's our intent.
Make it feel right, make it feel beautiful.
Yeah. Well, it will be basically a gateway from two perspectives. Is the sort of the western gateway to Memorial Park, and it will also be kind of the entrance into the Uptown area. So we'll try to make it very special and something that will not only just function wonderfully, but will be something that will be a signature, if you will, project.
Well, what one thing, before, before we quit today, I wanted to, I think would be just thinking about what you did here with, removing the electric wires from the sky. That's underground utilities. That's so fantastic. It makes such a difference to making a place look great. You've done it throughout this whole Uptown looks good because you don't have that. And you have it, and I think in the future, I'm hoping that there can be pressure brought to bear saying this is such a wonderful thing for property values, for the way places look, for the way trees look. It's horrible to have the electric company come through every 3 or 4 years and cut these great big V shapes out of the middle of oak trees.
Yeah.
I know you've done oak tree planting here, and we know, with Rice University, Bob Hope says Main Street going south through Rice University area is the most beautiful site, and whatever. But he pumped it up. Of course, it went on the front page of the paper. But the oak trees go across Main. It's a canopy of oak leaves.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And it's right there by the Herman Park. And it's really a beautiful drive. And to say, oh, well, we want to cut a big V shape in case there is a major storm coming through in a couple of years, then we won't take us as long to get the electricity back on. I personally, or is it okay? Let's leave the leaves for light now. I like trees more than I like wires. Let's just live with it. And if the storm does come that knocks down wires, we're going to go a little bit longer to get it fixed. And we're going to try a little bit harder to plan to make the repairs. But don't mess up. Let's bury the wires. Let's find the way of the utility company. Make those guys, making a fortune, and there's not a lot of competition.
Yeah.
Let's do it right. Make Houston a better place. Try to get as many of these utility lines underground as we possibly can. What you've done here is a great example. I would say if you had a bunch of oak trees with big, ugly V shapes cut out of them, the value of the property in Uptown would be worth less.
Yeah, absolutely. I think very early on, and I'm looking back to one guy, Mr. Hines, Gerald Hines, set a standard for developing buildings with really high-end architects, high-quality design, and Hines was building buildings that were showstoppers, if you will, but because he had learned a lot about how to build a building and build it very efficiently, they could give you that signature architecture for the same price that other people were giving you, standard ugly stuff. So he set a standard. I think early on, and again, I got to give really so much credit to the vision and leadership of the boards of directors that I have had the good fortune to work with. They realized early on that beauty actually pays. Doing good things for the community in the end is good for their bottom line as well. I think that what we find is that, in difficult economic times, it's those A buildings that still is leased, where the other is the one that, gets boarded up. And so we have always tried to take our public rights of way and to bring them up to the standard of what the private development was. And we have had a great opportunity working with our electrical companies and other utilities about getting utilities buried. And it's amazing, the day you bury them underground, no one remembers how ugly they were. So it's a sort of they pat you on the back one day and then they don't remember what happened.
Well, I would like to see it expand. I would like to see it expand as far as we could throughout the whole city. In this,
and I'll tell you, when I can't remember, I think it was the 2008 hurricane that came through the coast, and much of Houston area was out of business for 3 weeks. That morning, I drove up to my office. Now I walked through broken glass, but I came into the building and pushed the button, and air conditioning was on and the elevators were working because our utilities were buried. And so there is a real economic benefit as well as an aesthetic and tax benefit. And I think it's a good thing I agree with you, Ralph. We should do more and more of it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's great. It's a great example. It pays off. If you do have a big storm, your utilities are buried. You don't have your power outages. That's a great thing. It's a great thing. Yeah, you've also, speaking of the landscape, as I look over Uptown here, quality building, Williams Tower, Transco Towers, what it was called originally. Post Oak Place, the great Philip Johnson architecture. And of course, some people are talking about that. That may be a place where there could be some residential happening. But I've also just, what you've done with I guess the streetscape, the chrome, all that was a big deal was that about 20 years ago? I'm not exactly sure, but
Ralph, we have to remember that 1990 wasn't 20 years ago. Although that my wife and I, given our age group, we tend to think that. So we started work really on that in the very early 90s, and here we are in 2023. And they have aged well, I think. Again, good design, done artfully articulated and crafted. And we are now sort of doing our second generation of the rings over the major intersections. We have the first one up at Westheimer and Post Oak, and we're putting up 5 more in the first part of this coming year. And we have to go back and why in the world did we do that?
Yeah.
So Ralph, if you'll think about it, I had the good fortune of coming on board in 1986. And 1986 wasn't a great time in Houston. And we were really thinking about how can we differentiate ourselves? How can we define our district in a way that would be memorable, et cetera? And one of the early on projects we did was a little simple thing and pretty crude, is to put 80 Christmas trees along Post Oak Boulevard between Westheimer and San Felipe. We did that in that very first year, and how simple that was. But what it showed, and I think the property owners and the boards of directors were very impressed that what we were able to do by everyone working together. The Christmas tree success led directly to us creating the first management district in Texas, where we could, in a more fair and equitable way, assess or tax individual property owners to help solve the problems of the area's rapid growth. So then you have the management district, and you say, let's do something to help define the district. And those, there's really not a sign anywhere that says Uptown Houston, but there are signs everywhere that you're in a unique place, whether it's our street luminaires, our traffic signals, the idea of building these arches over Post Oak Boulevard. You can imagine a board of directors seeing those concepts early on and saying, that's what we should do. And so,
that was great. I've read, I guess, that, the genesis of that started like a guy driving through, the Permian Basin out in West Texas and see pipelines, and somehow that evolved into these, big pipe-like, highly polished chrome arches over Post Oak. Is that true, or is that?
That was the sales pitch from the architects and designers. Yes, that the idea about Texas, that much of its wealth, whether it's agricultural or minerals, comes from the ground. And the example he used is a gentleman by the name of Henry Beer, who continues to work with us to this day. He says he's driving through the Permian Basin and just driving along the road, and all of a sudden a pipeline, comes up out of the ground, and of course those are for expansion and things like that, I think, and then they dive back into the ground, and using that kind of analogy to sort of talk about the wealth of the resources of Texas and in these arches. And it was, let me tell you that building all of these unique one-off, whether it's an arch or a ring over a street, or even our street, our pedestrian lighting. One of the things I'm so proud of is that if you come to dinner here in the Uptown area, you walk out, you feel very comfortable walking on our sidewalks, simply because it's so well lit, and you're not walking through shadows, you're walking through a fairly well lit environment. And then we're so proud also of the 1,000 street trees just on Post Oak Boulevard alone, where during the summer, that dapple shade along sidewalks is very enjoyable. And I do see that just as on South Main, where those oak trees graciously, arch over our major thoroughfares, within years, we'll see Post Oak Boulevard, leaves touching leaves from either side. And so all of this is about creating a livable urban environment. And I think we've dedicated an incredible amount of effort and resources, whether it's burying overhead utilities, planting trees, doing pedestrian lighting so that you can, the city always has street lights that will light the concrete the cars grow on, but they don't necessarily want to pay for the electricity to light the sidewalks that you and I walk on. And so we have kind of found a niche there to really add to the area. One last thing, took an Uber back from Intercontinental, and a gentleman got off the West Loop at Post Oak Boulevard. He says, "I always love coming to this area because it's so bright at night." And I kind of sat in the back seat to go, "Thank you."
Isn't that great to get that kind of comment? One more thing. Just like I said, I'd love to talk to you for another all afternoon. But when we were getting started, when we were doing the light rail back in the day, and you and I are here when it started, when it was built. Some of the first things that went through, and it seemed like, well, we're gonna connect, the major employment areas, downtown, the medical center, and the concept is it should be connected to Uptown. The three things, and that got derailed, and for political reasons, that just. But it was that. I know this wasn't your just thing. You wasn't your decision as politicians and congressmen, but that was a disappointment, and we all wanted. Many people wanted to see it come down. I guess it's talked about West Park many times. Come down West Park, and then making that nice turn coming up Post Oak through the middle of Uptown. That are we ever going to recover from that mistake? Which, in my opinion, is a big mistake.
I've had years of therapy. And so when you trying to get over the numerous failed plans, I have a history of having worked for Metro. I have an education as an urban planner, and so I have long supported and worked both in the background and in leadership, trying to find a way to connect entire community together. And I think that transit's a key part of that. And I'm just amazed. If you think about all the light rail that has been built in Houston, and not 1 inch of it has gone west of Main Street. We
don't care about going to Northline Mall, man.
Yeah. So we have, and look, I'm a big believer that all parts of the city need to be connected, and we have a lot of employment opportunities for communities that are perhaps not as well heeled as the immediate area around in the Uptown area. So we're a destination where people go to make a living, and a wide variety of incomes, all the way from being workers in the support industry, like in hotels, in retail, as well as engineers and financial gurus, if you will, at other jobs. And so I think connectivity is terribly important. I think no matter what, the Post Oak Boulevard's Silver Line that's currently is light rail can provide every function that we need in this area. It connects into regional suburban commuter systems through the transit centers. It connects into local service like Richmond and Westheimer, and you can transfer and go anywhere up and down Post Oak Boulevard to all those entertainment and business and employment opportunities. And then finally, it can just simply move me to go to lunch in Uptown Park versus here where my office is located. And so that is there. It may not be as
We're talking about the metro bus rapid transit. Is that the official name for it?
yeah.
It looks, there's not exactly a official rail there, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a cross between a bus and a metro rail.
As a user, it's very difficult to tell the difference. The good, great vehicles, great ride, frequent convenient service, stations, offline fare, etc. I think personally, if you could imagine, I'd hate to see the electrical overhead wires in the midst of all the live oak trees that we've planted, and et cetera. So we have something I think that will work a long time. There's just going to have to be an evolution. We still don't have a transit system. We've got pieces, and if you'll think about it, Ralph, there's probably, I can't think of any transit systems worldwide where you could live in Katy and go 25 miles to downtown without a single stop. That's incredible service, but it limits you that all you can do is carry that one seat from Katy to downtown. If you could stop at intermittent transit centers, not every mile, but maybe one at West Belt and one at the West Loop, then you begin to tap into other markets. So don't get me started on the philosophy about how to develop an effective transit system. I'm eternally an optimistic person, but I don't think we're near the solution that we need to be in a city that's really an international city where people view transit as well, of course, that's how you get there,
Yeah, that's what we got to make the rings. I think the rail needs to be a ring, and what I would like, if I was mayor,
are you announcing?
Yeah, that's my announcement. No, we're take down Post Oak, make the connection, go in on West Park, which kind of peters out near Kirby.
Yeah. But
then go across and then hop on top of the Southwest Freeway, on top of 69, 59. I still call it 59, but have an elevated train,
right,
picking up around Kirby and take it down, drop it into, where the Rice Ion is, the former Sears building there on Main Street. That would be, you could have a big center there, but you could avoid, and it seems like you got the West Park right away waiting. It's there, it's paid for, it's done. And just that's because I've always wanted to from the beginning. My personal opinion was, hey, why are we building this on the street? But I would rather have seen, elevated, I guess.
At some point, it's a high-speed service, and then at some point it becomes a collection and distribution function. So in Uptown or downtown, you can run on street, and that's a pretty high level of service. People can get off and on, and that's great. But if you're coming in from Fort Pender County or Katy or the Woodlands, you need pretty high speed service. And so I think the question is, as Metro looks at the university and other corridors that they're currently working on, are we really developing something that has higher level of service than a good local bus that's averaging 12 miles an hour? And I think we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, well, Bill King, the guy that ran for mayor a while back, he's been critical publicly about the ridership of our new system on Post Oak.
Yeah,
this saying that the ridership has I think it opened in 2020 or something. The ridership is not what it should be.
Yeah.
What can be done about that?
Yeah. What's interesting, I'll tell you the pandemic. You think it impacted the office building, where one of the also collateral damage was transit, and transit service nationwide has certainly taken a hit. For example, downtown Houston during the pandemic had as little as 20% of the number of cars that normally come into the parking garages were in the parking garages. We were in the 30s and 40s at the worst, 50. What I'm leading to is that there are fewer people going to work in office buildings today than there were in February of 2020 before we shut down in March. And transit certainly has taken a big hit, because if they're not in the office buildings, they're not riding transit.
Return to work it also has its impact on the transit systems. People aren't going 5 days a week.
And so I would say that that I think that the assessment that this ridership isn't what we'd hoped it to be is absolutely correct. But at the same time, I think our world is a different world than what we had in 2020. Look, this is not a 2-year or 3-year decision. It's a 50-year decision. It's a 100-year decision. That corridor on Post Oak Boulevard will always be there. As technology evolves, as development and cycles of economics occur, and as we do more residential development, it's the future of transit use is a future that is yet to be written. And I think we have designed and implemented a highly cost-effective transportation facility that will be here when our economy gets back to the condition it was earlier. I'd a lot rather have good transit than me sitting in a corridor that doesn't. And just long-term, development just makes more sense. And I think we'll feed it better. We'll have better commuter service. We'll build more of the BRT in the University Corridor and other places. I'm optimistic, but I also think very realistic, is that transit is universal, an issue worldwide. And I don't think the DNA of Texans is drastically different than the DNA of other cultures, that as our areas become more and more urban, transit will become more and more important to us.
Nothing stays the same. I mean, it's the biggest crash, the biggest crisis, and then, hey, another 3, 4, 5, 6 years, it's a totally different game. And but John Breeding, thanks so much for taking time with me. And on a personal note, as I covered the news here, for you many times over the years, you've always been courteous and helpful and insightful. I don't know what your next plan is, but I sincerely mean it. Thanks for helping me to understand what's going on in the city and to write about it. Really appreciate it, and I hope we talk again soon.
Well, it's been a wonderful opportunity to contribute, and Ralph, it's been great to know you personally and professionally. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John.